Right, the clock says 12:30, so we'll make a start. We'll start by reading this out. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being videoed. Members of the public are entitled to record the proceedings and are requested to give prior notice so that any additional measures that may assist can be put into place. Any member of the public who has any concerns should raise them now. Okay, so that's that. Item 1, apologies for absence. I think we've got a full house. Item 2, disclosable pecuniary interests. Oh, Leslie first.
Item number 9, the garage for Green Route.
Okay.
Online.
Right. And just so the public understand, it's about village halls and business rates. And if people are involved in the organisations of village halls, they're expected to bear an interest when their items. Item 3, the minutes. They're included. Everyone happy with the minutes?
Yeah.
Right. Item 4, public question time. Okay. None. Item 5, member questions. None. Item 6, scrutiny items. No. Right. Item 7, Waterfall performance report. Councillor Steve Chalmley.
Thank you, Leader. While I'm just waiting for that to load. The report as is set out and tabled. The only outstanding one which I think may raise some questions is the increased fatalities on the roads. This comes back to the way it is reported by the police instead of number of incidents. It is now number of people involved in incidents, hence it's gone up. But there is no major crash sites that have suddenly appeared out of nowhere across the county. So that's the only one which I would highlight, but I'm happy to move.
Alan.
Just one or two questions on this. Clearly, paragraph 6.1 points to measures for improving public health. I'd like the portfolio holders' comments on what impact the massive cuts that are proposed in the next paper on public health are likely to have. I also see in the same paragraph 6.2 that visitors to the library is down by a very significant 11%, and I just wonder what explanations there are for that, and if any measures are being put in place to reverse that trend. I would also like to ask under paragraph 6.3, it says that 98% of premises are rated as generally satisfactory or higher. What I'd like to ask is, what difference are there in the number of inspections now compared with the previous year? Are the number of new inspections, the number of overall inspections going down, as I understand they are?
I'm not sure whether we'll be able to answer all those, but anyway, Steve.
You're absolutely right, Lincoln. I won't be able to answer all those, but I can look across the table at colleagues if they want to comment. Otherwise, I'll come back to you with some facts and figures on paper on.
Anybody know? Oh, Lee or Rod?
Yes, Alan. So, you're talking about the cuts in public health, and there are savings proposals detailed in the subsequent paper, but I'm happy to field a query on the broad thrust of that at this point. Our public health budget nationally is being cut by 2.6% per year, so not a decision that's being taken locally, so the context of that has an impact. Additionally, it's worth pointing out that the public health ring fence grant has to be spent on public health outcomes. So although you will see savings noted across the financial strategy, This is our approach across the different directorates to look at opportunities to continue to deliver those outcomes as we are required to, but to do that by working more closely with colleagues in the other directorates. So it's that work that this speaks to.
Leslie?
I'd like to come back on the library situation. This is a national trend, unfortunately, when the numbers of people that are actually visiting library buildings is decreasing. What this report doesn't show actually is the significant increase in the number of digital loans. One of the major issues at the moment is the number of young people that are now securing their library books by in a digital version. I am in discussion with a number of organisations regarding the libraries as to how we can increase the numbers of visitors and the loans to, from libraries, and that's going to involve things like creating hubs, etc., putting other facilities within library settings, or putting libraries actually within other settings. So, as I said, I'm not unduly concerned about the numbers, the drop in numbers of actual people visiting, because the overall numbers have actually gone up, but I think it is a national trend and one that we're all struggling to sort.
Just so I'm clear, so digital books, you know, I assume you go in with your iPad or whatever and it's downloaded. So are the numbers for that becoming significant?
Yes, and you don't have to go into the library.
Oh, right. Oh, I suppose not,
You can
yeah.
do it directly offline.
Yeah, why
Sorry,
not? Because you
online.
can with the Kindle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So
it's
you-
the same sort of principle.
Yeah, what the libraries, and in fact I think it's a positive thing in some ways, because our numbers aren't dropping as fast as some of the other libraries, because our librarians and the library teams are actually looking at other ways of encouraging people to go into libraries. So lots and lots of events going on and things. But it's the way of the future, I think.
The world is changing. Hannah?
Well, before we go on, I did ask about public health inspections before.
Oh, right. Do we know about numbers? Have they changed or are they, do we know?
Sorry, could you come back with the question again, Alan?
Well,
I'm furiously making notes.
You're quoting here that 98% of premises are rated as generally satisfactory or higher in terms of food safety standards. I was asking the way in which the number of actual inspections year on year had changed, because my perception is, or understanding is, that they've declined significantly.
Sorry, yes, so you're referring to environmental health inspections?
Yeah.
Ah, okay, so that's reg services, which isn't my area. But from my own experience some years ago, and reg services
It's with me
next to
now.
me,
Yeah.
it's done on a risk basis now, so it's a different process. So instead of going every 6 months, you do a risk basis. So some premises you go to every week because they obviously need a lot of support, and some premises who manage their premises well go to less frequent inspections. So it's on a risk management basis.
Yes, would you like me to get something in writing for you?
If you
Alan?
could.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Hannah?
Thank you. I really like the online portal for this, but I think what's missing from it is anything to do with the environment and environmental progress with meeting sort of environmental protection measures. And I think the council should have something on there about a metric to measure journeys that are not made by cars, so increasing cycle use or increasing use of public transport. I don't know how to measure it, but I think somebody should think about how we can be promoting in our market towns less car use.
I will ask somebody if they know how to go about trying to formulate those figures. I'm not quite sure I know the answers,
Yeah.
because if you're on your bike, you don't necessarily get recorded by anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
So, you know, but we'll have a look and see what.
there's lots of ways of measuring people's mobile phones and things. I don't know whether speeds. Yeah, I don't know how it might be done. Is anybody else doing it in the country? How could perhaps?
I don't know. We'll have a look, and I really wouldn't want to say yes we can,
Yeah.
because I don't know how feasible it is.
And the other thing that would be very interesting would be in terms of the council's own energy use, metrics on A, is our energy use going up or down, and B, what percentage of it is renewable, and perhaps how much we are actually generating ourselves.
The only thing I will say is, when we do this building, I'm sure it'll go down here
Yeah.
quite a lot.
The other statistic on the portal doesn't come out in this report that concerns me is the 120 young people who were admitted to hospital for self-harm, which is, you know, 2 a month, that's a statistic, it's not particularly different than the rest of England. But it highlights again how mental health services in this county for young people still leave a lot to be desired. It's difficult for the council because we only have arm's length influence over that, but it does highlight how we should be always mindful that wherever we can, we should be trying to improve those services.
Rather than try and answer, and not necessarily today, but I'll get Rod and Lee to have a think about whether we can do anything or not. I don't know is the answer, but yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, happy to respond broadly. I mean, I think it's fair to say that we have had at the Health and Wellbeing Board representatives both from the commissioners of a range of services and the providers, and there have been some serious questions asked about the nature of the delivery and the reality of that, and to what extent the providers have struggled, I think, in the early days of the delivery of the contract. What I would say is I know that my colleague who chairs our own HASC and is on Joint HOSC is here with us today, and I know that she shares some of your anxiety about the delivery of that, and I'm sure that a word with Councillor Calder afterwards would clarify what the situation is, but we're very happy from the Health and Wellbeing Board to continue to seek assurances around the delivery of that and to see improvements. It is also worth saying that the mental health needs assessment did come to both Joint HOSC and Cabinet, and the subsequent action plan coming out of that is the central part of our mental health partnership board work, and we would be expecting to be working much more closely and more effectively with partners as a result of that partnership approach. But I mean, you're absolutely right to highlight the issue, and I'm sure that my colleague in Children's Services would share your concerns.
Right. If everyone's content, then we'll go to the recommendations, which are at the top of page 6. There's 2 recommendations. Well, it wasn't seconded on the report, I'm happy to second it. So, everyone happy with the recommendations? Can I see all those in favour? I have been asked to make it clearer when we're voting and not voting, so... Okay, thank you, that's clearly carried. Right, we go back to the agenda, we're on to item 8, financial strategy. Councillor David Minnery.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'd like to formally move the 2 recommendations that appear in the papers, one at the foot of page 13, which is to note the financial implications identified in 1819 and 1920 from the implementation of the amended pay and reward policy. B is to approve the savings proposals which will contribute towards the cost of introducing the amended pay and reward policy as outlined in Appendix 1, which is attached to the papers. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, Leader. If there are any background detail that is required, then I will need, as Councillor Chandler did at the previous item, I should need to refer to other individual portfolio holders for that detail, but I formally move the recommendations.
I'm happy to accept it. Madge Shinton did ask to speak, so...
Thank you. Leader, Chairman. Always have to get these on wheels. My concern really is the fact that how much is being siphoned off the public health budget. I just think if we're not careful, we shall. I see public health as a foundation stone of what we're trying to achieve across the whole of the health budget at the moment. If we don't put it all together, public health is a piece of the jigsaw right at the bottom. If we start to tinker around with that too much, the whole of the building, the whole of the plan is going to wobble, and I don't think we should do that. It's interesting that the word partnership crops up very regularly, and I believe in partnership because as I look across what's been happening, only just the last 2 years that I've really delved into it, the wastage, the duplication is enormous, which is why that partnership with the CCGs, South Town, is so important. So, for me, when you look at what you're proposing to take off, and I'm looking really at children's services, and you've got here adult services, improved service integration. If we don't have some funding to integrate, it won't happen. So for me, the unintended consequences of that, I think, is very serious. I do ask you to look at that again, stand back and have a wider vision of what the unintended consequences might be for our other partners. If they see us reducing funding in public health, they will also be looking, and by the time everybody's chipped away at it, we might as well have all stayed at home and not done anything. I just do deeply regret the mental health promotion. We know that CAMHS has been in a disaster for quite a period of time now, which I think is totally unacceptable. And what we do is we rely very much on school teachers. And I see that one of the parts here, there's going to be a reduction in school nurses. We really can't do with that. They're very thin on the ground now, and they do support the teaching staff, particularly at primary school level, where, first of all, we pick up some of the many problems in mental health, which are only going to get worse if we don't deal with them at primary school level. So all I'm asking you to do is to have another look at that. I understand about the financial situation, I really do. But however, it's not much good knocking the foundation bricks out when you're doing something like this, because there are unintended consequences. Thanks, Chair.
Alan?
This paper is a bit of a disaster area, really, as Madge is alluding to, though she doesn't use terms like that. Particularly when we look at it in relation to the performance review that you just considered and think about healthy people and those sort of objectives. It sort of gives light to those ambitions, clearly. It's an attack on our health and care services. It slashes public health by £1.6 million, and similarly the same for adult care. And it flies in the face of all that we try to encourage, which is integration of health services and seamless delivery, and also various authorities working together for the betterment of the population as a whole. And it's in the middle of a future fit so-called consultation, which many are criticising as being too little, badly conceived, and lacking recognition of the needs for more investment in both social care and public and preventative medicine. It makes nonsense of that. I would just like to ask, and I see that Lee's name is against most of these items, Lee, a number of questions, because I would have thought it sensible that this had been subject to some sort of rigorous scrutiny before it came here. I ought to emphasise, of course, that it's here because of the impact of measures of austerity of the past and the present, which is leading to seeking to put our pay structures right, and also referring to the performance review. I see that the pay of people in Shropshire is some £82 behind the pay of other parts of the country, and we know that those disparities need to be put right for the good of our own staff and the knock-on effects on others. But nevertheless, I'd like to ask Lee, has and a number of questions, I'm afraid, I hope you don't mind this to me now. The joint commissioning with the CCG, £1 million, has that been abandoned? That seems to be reading between the lines in the actual text of the thing. That's not going to happen. This is one of the failures that has been mentioned. What are the implications of C19, remove non-mandated activity from current 0 to 25 PHNS contracts? I'd also like to ask page 29, what are the implications of not improving the service integration but reducing it by £70,000, the NHS health checks and help to quit? I'd also like to ask on line A32, Because I know that there have been some briefing sessions about social prescribing in the last week or so, around and about. What is happening to that service, given that £135,000 cuts are alluded to? On line H33, what are the implications of the £250,000 cut in community drug and alcohol services? Surely that, I know it's red, surely that can't happen. And in terms of the final one at the bottom, how can we remove all inflationary growth? How does that happen in the modern climate? And that's about it for now. I just think that the public I think that the public as a whole throughout the county deserves to have some explanations of why these cuts in looking after their public health and care are being proposed at this time.
Part of the reason, and these will go into detail, but it is important that as a council we have a balanced budget, and this is heading towards giving us a balanced budget, because when I took over we didn't have a balanced budget, and that's where I'm determined we will head. Lee, I don't know if you want to try and...
Well, I think we need to be clear. You did question me earlier on about the grant, and what I did make clear is that the Public Health Ring Fence grant has to be spent on public health outcomes. So although you're very keen on cuts and austerity as useful bylines for the members of the press that are in the room, what we're actually talking about here is how we use resources within the council more effectively, not how we stop spending on public health. So, and the other thing I need to say by way of context is that Shropshire, in terms of its public health outcomes, actually has extremely good public health outcomes. So although we've got one of the lowest per capita allocations of public health ring fence grant, we rate as one of the best areas in terms of the National Public Health Outcomes Framework. So we have a healthy population. So whilst I absolutely understand the anxiety around some of these reductions, I would also point to the fact that these are proposals. So other than the ones that are green, anything that's amber or red has not been agreed, signed off, or in some cases found. Okay, and that's the reason why they're rated in terms of those colours. So, for example, you touch upon the drug and alcohol service. Now, that is a proposal to find some efficiencies and some smarter ways of working out of the current contract provision, and that's why it's not in the current year, because it will form part of our consideration when we come to recontract that provision. I can't imagine that I will pick up on every point that you've tabled, and if I do miss any, I will absolutely provide you with a written answer afterwards. There is a continued and strong commitment to work with the CCG around joint commissioning. I'm not quite sure where you've read or interpreted, and my apologies if it isn't clear in the paper, but those efficiencies and opportunities for working more closely through joint commissioning are going ahead with the CCG, and we do anticipate being able to derive efficiencies and savings out of that. As far as the social prescribing work, you mentioned the social prescribing, we absolutely are committed to social prescribing. You'll know that we've recently launched our work in Shrewsbury, working with practices in Shrewsbury around social prescribing, and we had a fantastically well-attended event that I attended the other week. So we are working on that. We are committed to it. But at A32, that 135,000 represents the opportunity of aligning the social prescribing work with our existing adult social care Let's Talk Local hubs. This is about working more efficiently, not about cutting our commitment to social prescribing. I can't answer the question on inflationary growth, thankfully, because it's got David Minery next to it, so I will hand over to him for that one. But you're absolutely right to highlight, as is Madge, the potential unintended consequences, both the confidence within the system when we start looking at some of these issues, and the confidence of our partners to public health. And I would hope that by making sure that I attend as many meetings as possible and I work with colleagues on the detail of this, that we make sure that whilst we will continue to drive for savings and to become more efficient, we will not be wanting to reduce the outcomes for individuals in the services and the systems that we work in. Because if we're going to reduce individuals' public health outcomes, then we are absolutely not doing what it says on the tin. And I readily accept that there is anxiety and that there are issues around some of this, but we have got to work more efficiently and we will continue to strive to do so. Thank you.
Do you want to comment, David, on the 700,000?
Yes, Lee, yes, please. I suppose it could have done with a couple more words adding. What this is, Alan and anybody else who's interested, when the budget is prepared, there is an expectation that various things that are currently commissioned will be recommissioned, and an allowance is made to cover that. When the contract is actually let, sometimes it comes in at a lower figure. And where that's come in as a lower figure, that saving has materialised, has been achieved, and that's the total of those is what that £700,000 is.
Okay. Anna?
Thank you. I share Marcus and Alan's concerns about the cuts to public health spending in terms of those things being largely preventative, so saving money down the road. And I really think the list of items in Appendix 1 should go to a scrutiny committee so that there's the opportunity to understand exactly what it means, because a simple one line for each one is extremely hard to tell exactly what it would mean, and to have a broader discussion of what the risks associated with all of those things would be. A, the risk of it happening, and B, the risk of it not happening and therefore not making the savings. I wondered, paragraph 4.3, when it says that the Joint Commission with the CCG has not progressed because there was more of a focus on recovering debt. Could not both of those things be pushed forward at once? Is there a lack of resource in terms of who faces the CCG and who deals with those issues? And it seems as though if there's £1 or £2 million to be made, then perhaps more resource needs to be put towards that in terms of bringing those savings forward more quickly. I also wondered 6.2, there's a very vague comment here about, or maybe now we've got a pay rise, we might be spending less on agency fees. Is that quantified at all? How much do we think we might save through that? And then just as a general point, it's not really a financial strategy, this. It's a, how the hell do we pay for that pay rise we just gave ourselves? And it does highlight, I think, we're obviously in a very difficult situation, and as you know, the Liberal Democrats supported pay rise for our workers, but we had grave misgivings about some of the higher, very large pay rises. And this really does point towards, have we really got the money for that? Was it an irresponsible thing to do? Thank you.
Can you turn your microphone? Lee?
Could I just come back to the specific issues for me? Particularly, I think, in relation to scrutiny, I am absolutely not the chair of scrutiny. It's not my place to decide how scrutiny conducts itself. But I do know from conversations that I've already had with Councillor Karen Calder, who has already questioned me on a couple of these issues. I cannot imagine that this will not be subject to that detailed work. And I will be very happy, as I always am, to support that process, because I would want to make sure for myself that we are completely robust on this, and colleagues and officers will be supporting the process wholeheartedly, so I can provide you any assurance on that. I think the only other thing to say, specifically around the CCG and the work that we're doing around joint commissioning, there is a tremendous window of opportunity with the CCG, the work we're doing at the moment. There is a new exec team in the CCG, much more, much easier to work with than perhaps we've had in the past. We are making very significant progress, both around some of the issues around historic debt, around CHC funding, but also around the opportunities from what is, across the two organisations, a very significant budget, for us to do that much more effectively and more efficiently to get better outcomes. Thank you.
Claire.
Thank you very much, Leader. I hope the press have got their pens ready. I do get sick of the political posturing, because the Liberal Democrats actually abstained when it came to the staff's pay rise. And I'm sure all the staff here know that. But it's very easy to say one thing and put another in all your magazines. Anyway, as far as the other issue goes, my colleague, Karen Calder, is quite happy to take that to her scrutiny committee. But let's hope we can get some facts in the papers. Thank you.
Nick.
Thanks, Leader. Just on the very specific point about what we pay for agency staff, it does seem to me a bit of a no-brainer that it's much better to pay directly employed staff a bit more and to employ fewer agency staff. Very crudely, an agency social worker in children's services is costing double what we would pay our own staff. So it seems to me to be a welcome move in the right direction. I can't say what impact it will have in the short term. I'm sure in the medium and longer term it can only be beneficial to employ fewer agency staff, because for all sorts of other reasons they clearly don't have a great deal of loyalty to Shropshire if they're on an agency contract. If we directly employ them, we would hope very much we're a good authority. We would hope very much to have loyal, committed staff. We're more likely to do that if we employ them directly, Leader.
Thank you. I think the basis of a lot of what's been said, though, is this is about the council moving towards ways of working better and more efficiently and actually achieving results by spending less money. And that's what we're trying to do all the time, because that's what we're going to have to do as we go forward, because there's going to be less money as we go forward. So we're going to be more efficient in... Sorry, Alan, you've had your say. I'm going to move on in a minute. You know, and that's what this whole report is about as we go forward, being a more efficient council and actually driving savings where it's sensible. And so far, everything we've done has shown that we haven't affected the results for the public. Most of what we've done, if not all of what we've done, has not affected the public performance at all. And there's no reason to suspect that it'll be any different with what we do here. We expect the outcomes for the public to be just as good, if not better, as we go forward, by us being a more efficient organisation and working with partners better as we go forward. Right, I am going to move on. Well, right, yeah.
So just one final comment, that we are talking about a public health ring-fenced grant. Ring-fenced means the grant is going to be spent on public health, and therefore what we're talking about here is how that grant will be spent in working more efficiently in different ways. We shouldn't run away with the idea that we're reducing expenditure in public health. It will remain exactly as it is now within the parameters of the ring-fenced grant, but we will be looking for the most efficient activities that our money can buy within that grant.
I am going to move on. You've had your opportunities to speak earlier. So it's been moved and seconded. Is everyone happy with it? Can I see all those in favour? Right, thank you. Item 9 is the review of non-domestic rates, discretionary and council tax discretionary discounts.
Yeah, can I just say, I'm involved in a community court in this context, but I'm not in this committee, so I'm not going to speak on it.
Doesn't matter, you should still leave the room.
Right, Councillor Minery.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I shall be brief, because this is not the first time that we'll be discussing this. As members who've read the report will realise that this is just the start of a... I'll start again. I didn't realise that was that massive. There'll be no nuclear bars. Right, I'll start again. It's a short paper, but a very, very long and detailed policy attached to it at the back. And this is a stage in the process. The final decision will be taken at the September council. What we're doing today is firing the starting pistol, if you like, for a 6-week consultation period, during which those who feel that they might be affected by the proposed changes have an opportunity to make representation. The full detail is set out in the accompanying appendix. I would stress, the leader, that this is not being done as a means of trying to find some more money or savings or anything of that nature. This is the 3-year review that we've been carrying out every 3 years for some time, and we've been doing this since probably the end of March, early April, and we have reached some conclusions that in certain cases we need to review the policy. I will just be clear, because there has been some concern in the press, I think, about possible impact on village halls. There is no intention whatsoever to change the position that village halls find themselves in. The changes that are being proposed will affect a very small number of potential sports clubs or other large-scale activities going on within the community, where there's a suspicion that maybe they're not as operating on the same basis that those that genuinely are entitled to relief. I've got to say, there is no target set here. It is a matter of being fair to everybody, and that's why I'm doing it, because currently we're not being fair to everybody. But I move the recommendations.
And I'm happy to second. I would stress, because I've had representations about village halls. Village halls, whether they have a bar or not, will not be affected by this decision. They will continue to get 100% rate relief, business rate relief. And I think that needs just making clear in words of one syllable. It makes no difference whether they've got a bar or not. They will continue to receive the relief they've been getting in the past. Any other?
Yeah, if I just briefly say on that, actually, in the actual policy, that is crystal clear. It's just unfortunate that in preparing the report, it wasn't spelled out as clearly as it should be. But actually, in the detail of the policy, that is absolutely crystal clear.
Thank you. Could you just give a little more sort of background and the thinking behind the social enterprises and community interest companies, in that I can understand perhaps you don't want to give rate relief to an organisation that makes a lot of money, pays some staff, pays their directors, you're questioning why they need rate relief. But if you had a not-for-profit company that perhaps employed 1 or 2 people on a low wage, and a director was one of them, and they really aren't generating very much money, but if the director wasn't paid, the work would cease because they need to be paid something. How is that going to affect those organisations?
Yes, thank you. That's a very fair question, and you're absolutely right. Shropshire relies very heavily on a lot of these sort of organisations where people don't work for very much money. They might have a director who gets some remuneration. For me, this is all a matter of scale and what it is that they're actually doing. We do know that there are, and for obvious reasons I can't be specific, but we do know that there are some organisations where we would question both the scale and the remuneration that appears to be being made. They are effectively businesses and operating as businesses, or masquerading as something else. And I'm not saying there's a huge number, but we believe that there are a few that fall into that. So we need to tighten up to make sure that that's not seen as an easy route to avoid paying business rates on something which is actually a commercial venture. I can assure you here and now that this is not the intention to penalise any organisation that is doing the sort of good that charitable type works, helping a lot of them helping this council actually to deliver its own policies. And they will be looked at on a case-by-case basis, and there is built into the policy a mechanism for people to appeal in any case.
I was going to say, it is discretionary, so we do have the options of either giving or not giving, and interpreting the policy might need to come down to senior officers making a decision about some of these cases. But as David says, they will have the opportunity to appeal or argue their case, and that will be listened to on a sensible basis. Right, any other comments on the report? No? All those in favour, please show. Right, thank you. Can we get the others back? Shrewsbury Business Improvement District. Nick, I assume.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to formally move the recommendations at points 2.1 to 2.3. I think this is a fairly straightforward paper to go towards the end of Cabinet, but I want to just add a few little things into this. I want to start off by thanking the BID for their existing work, especially the BID team of Emma, Alex, Seb. For those of you who don't know him, he's actually here today. The businesses and the board members from within Shrewsbury who worked so hard behind the scenes for the delivery of everything the BID has done in the original 5-year period. This is simply a paper that's a legal requirement for them to go right back out to ballot, to renew for a further 5 years. But it'd be interesting to highlight a few little pieces of the work, and I want to get the opportunity of something that's launching today. But they've been really key as well in things like the Big Town Plan, which will be coming to Cabinet at the end of the month. The tourism work, I think the more we dig into it, the more we see originalshrewsbury.co.uk is really the website, go-to website for tourism. And tourism and what it brings to the whole of the county is so important for economic growth. I know sometimes we're accused of not mentioning it in documents, but we really don't forget about it, and we do appreciate the work that the BID have done on this. And I think, going out in the town at night, and on Saturday night, Councillor Dean Carroll and I are going out with the street pastors till 4 in the morning. But we're going into an area that has a purple flag. And the purple flag means that Shrewsbury is a safe and vibrant place for night times. Disappointing that some opposition members didn't even know what it was. It really shocks me. We have a wonderful place, and the BID have been instrumental in a lot of the things that have happened. And I want to highlight today the fact that now you will need a passport to come into Shrewsbury, because it's Independence Day. This is another BID-led incentive, which is you simply go shopping in the town at the Independence, and 46% of our shops are independent, which is probably why our footfall in February was up 8% compared to a national average where it was down 2%. They make such a difference to our wonderful town. So all you do, you simply go around and you get a few stamps in your book to show you've been shopping, and it's a really simple idea, and then you can enter a competition to win £100, there's 10 vouchers to go back into the shops and spend it. And I think it's a really good thing that we're supporting Admiral Tazizi, the A to Z of all the shops within Shrewsbury, and I really credit them for the work they've done on that. So it is a straightforward paper for the renewal of the BID area. Just want to draw your attention to one of the things in the risks. At 3.1, potentially if we didn't get a renewal of the BID, it would cost us about £2 million of investment in the town centre, which does go out into the outlying areas. And I'd also say that there's a slight increase in the area. Now, I personally would have liked to have seen it go a little bit bigger, but it's now going to incorporate Abbey Foregate. The works that have happened around there with the city, regenerating Abbey Foregate as a food destination. I think they've done really well. It'll cost us slightly more because we have some properties in that area, but an extra £2,000 of levy from Shropshire Council, I think, is very little for the reward we get. Welcome questions.
Any comments? Alan?
I'd just think, as a member of Shrewsbury Town Council, as well as the council chair, I'd just add to, as Nick is, just add to his endorsement of the BID. I think various people were cynical, to say the least, when it first emerged, and obviously it was successful in the first referendum, and hopefully it will be in this one, because they are doing a great deal of work to improve the attractiveness of the town, and to maintain its specific and special character as Shrewsbury town centre. Why they haven't moved it out to Frankwell yet? Is that on the agenda, Nick? I'm just asking. Or Seb, I'd probably give you the nod if we are. But it's just Abbey Foregate that the extension is at the time.
It's just Abbey Foregate at the moment, but I would look forward in 5 years' time for it to be extended out to the Flaxmill as part of the Northern Corridor, and possibly into Frankwell.
Well, I don't think we
But
want to pay that sort of leave that alone, Nick. But certainly there are proposals that are coming forward in the big town plan that are very much allied to the bid objectives and aspirations, and also our own. So I hope that they are successful in this, and that Shropshire's endorsement of it among the business community will encourage them to get out and vote.
Okay. Right. Well, we all seem to be saying the same thing. So the recommendation. Oh, sorry, David.
Yes, I just want to say a few words as a member who doesn't represent Shrewsbury, because to my mind, everything that we do, whether it's this, whether it's the big town plan that's just been mentioned, benefits the entire county. It's not that it's for the benefit of Shrewsbury alone, because it isn't. There are people in Market Drayton who rely on Shrewsbury for their work. They come in here to shop, and the more that we can improve that, the more their lives will be improved, more jobs will be created, more job opportunities will exist for people, not just in Market Drayton, but around Shropshire as a whole. So I really welcome this, and I'm sure it will be supported, not just here, but when we get to Cabinet as well. And I thank Alan for his words, because it's nice for once to see that everybody's in unison, but not the union.
Okay.
I was interested in what Nick said when he talked about the opposition don't know what it is.
I don't think he was referring to
Are you
you.
talking about in this chamber, or opposition to the bid don't know what it's all about? Or?
Coming back on that, I'd like to answer. It was a previous cabinet meeting where it was mentioned by the leader of the Liberals that that it was a really bad place to go to Shrewsbury at night. That was the suggestion, if you recall that, and I had to correct them, because we have this purple flag status. We've renewed on 3 occasions. We continue to do it with the great work of the bid and other people like the street pastors going out there and making the town a safe place to come. And it's very unfortunate when these sound bites are given that the press pick up on them and they go with a negative story about what is a wonderful place to go out and visit.
I won't claim to be a wild socialite, but I go out in Shrewsbury at times, and it's a wonderful place. There's a huge choice of eating places, etc. I'm not going to claim to be up till 4 o'clock in the morning for the street pastors, although they have invited me out with them. I thought 2 o'clock sounded quite late, by my standards. But yes, everything that the bid does, and Shrewsbury is thriving, and we are trying to make sure that the same ethos spreads through the county. But certainly it's driving things forward. And also, the bid in Oswestry seems to be having the same effect over there. It's starting to grow and become something really important. So yeah, I think we are supportive of business improvement districts. But right, there's some recommendations on the top of page 72, 212223. Everyone in favour, please show. Right, thank you very much. And then moving on, item 11, project update and approval, Ludlow Assembly Rooms. Steve Charnley.
Thank you, Lee. Return to my favourite subject in Ludlow. As you recall, we brought a paper back in March, I think it was, to find a solution for Ludlow Assembly Rooms, a long-term solution with long-term sustainability. This paper is a catch-up from that. Since then, a lot of work been going on, and we're now in a position to award the contracts to get the work done and then finalise the process. So the recommendations are clear there in 2.1, 2 and 3, and with that I move.
Okay.
And I'd love to second it,
Right, I think it's pretty straightforward. The only reason it's here is because the Constitution of the Council sets financial limits that we can spend, and this is above the ones that can be done without coming to Cabinet, so that's the only reason it's here. But the principle of what we're doing has been agreed previously. So all those in favour, please show. Thank you. Unfortunately, I now have to move.
I'd just say that you're moving on to an item where I had to leave the meeting last time, so I'm going to leave the room.
Right. Right, well, I was going to say exclusion of the public and press. So can I move that the press is public be excluded, and that's seconded. Right, we have a vote, all those in favour. So we're being filmed all the time, you see, so they just like us to be clear. So that